I'm Miriam. I'm 60 years old, and 2 years ago I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning and looked at a number on a piece of paper that terrified me. I had spent 30 years teaching other people how to build wealth. 30 years standing in front of congregations, in community centers, in living rooms packed with young couples just starting out, explaining with complete confidence the ancient Jewish principles of money. The 777 rule: rest, release, give. I had watched families transform their financial lives using these principles. And somehow, quietly, without even noticing it happening, I had stopped doing any of it myself. Let me tell you what happened. I am a rabbi. I have been a rabbi since my early 30s. I was born in New York to a traditional Jewish family, not wealthy people, but never desperate. My parents had something I did not fully understand as a child, a kind of steadiness, a rhythm to how they lived and how they handled money. My father worked in a small textile business. My mother managed the home and helped with the accounts. They were careful people. They were not anxious people. My mother used to say, "We are not rich in money, but we are not poor in wisdom." I did not know then how much weight that sentence carried. I know now. I became a rabbi because I wanted to teach. I loved studying Torah, loved the Talmud, the way one honest question opens into 10 more, and at the end, if you stay with it, you have learned something true about how to live. Over the years, as I counseled more families, I noticed that financial struggles followed a pattern, always the same pattern. Too much work, not enough rest. Too much accumulated debt and obligation, never examined, never released. Too little giving, or giving only what was left over, which was usually nothing. I began to connect what I was seeing to what the Torah had always said. That is how the 777 rule entered my work, not as something I invented, but as something I uncovered, something preserved for 3,000 years, waiting for people to take it seriously. For a long time I taught it well. There was a woman in my congregation, I will call her Sarah, who came to me after years of working 2 jobs and still falling behind every month. She was exhausted. She was ashamed. I walked her through all 3 sevens, the weekly rest, the Shemitah audit, the commitment to give first. Within 1 year, her situation looked completely different. She told me I had saved her life, and I believed I understood exactly why. But here is what I could not see. I was so focused on teaching the principle to others that I had quietly, gradually stopped living it myself, and I had not noticed. Exhaustion disguises itself as diligence. It makes you feel like you are doing more, when really you are doing everything less clearly. I had not taken a real day of sacred rest in almost 4 years. I told myself it was necessary. There was always another family in crisis, another class to prepare, another speaking engagement. My phone never went quiet. My calendar had no white space left in it. I was working 7 days a week and telling myself this was service. Honestly, it was not service. It was avoidance. Because when I stopped, when I was truly still, I would have had to look at my own finances, and I did not want to do that. So I stayed busy. The busyness felt like productivity, like forward motion, but I was burning fuel without navigating. The warning signs had been there for 2 years, maybe longer. A business partnership, a small publishing project with a colleague I respected, that had not produced meaningful income in 3 years. I kept it alive out of loyalty, out of not wanting to have the difficult conversation, out of not wanting to admit that something I had believed in was no longer working. There was an office I was still leasing downtown, a space I had once used 5 days a week and was now using maybe twice a month. I kept paying for it out of habit, out of telling myself things would pick back up. There were subscriptions, digital tools, professional memberships, online platforms I had signed up for at various points and completely forgotten, still drawing money from my account each month, silent and automatic and invisible unless you looked for them. And there was debt. Not catastrophic debt, not the kind that makes the news, but real debt, the kind that accumulates slowly, year by year, when you are too busy to sit down and actually look at the full picture. When you pay minimums and tell yourself you will address it properly soon. Each one of these obligations, on its own, was manageable. Together, across 4 years of not looking, they had created something I had been refusing to face. And all the while, I was sitting across from other families and telling them to face theirs. You see how that works. You can teach the truth and still hide from it in your own life. That is one of the harder things I have had to accept about myself. The night everything became undeniable, I was 58 years old. My husband had gone to bed. The house was quiet. I opened a spreadsheet I had been avoiding for months and made myself look. The number I found was not 0, but it was close enough that my hands went cold. I sat at that table for a long time. I did not cry right away. I just sat there and thought, how did this happen? I know better than this. I have helped hundreds of people avoid exactly this. And that was the hardest part. Not the number itself, the recognition, the understanding that I had been so focused on serving everyone else that I had left my own financial life completely unattended. That is not devotion. That is negligence dressed up as devotion. In the morning, I called an old colleague, a rabbi I had studied with in my 20s, a man who has never told me what I wanted to hear when what I needed was the truth. I told him what I had found. I told him I felt like a fraud. He listened. Then he asked me one question. He said, "Miriam, when did you last rest? I mean truly rest. Not a vacation where you still checked messages, but Shabbat. Sacred stillness, the real stop. When?" I tried to remember. I could not give him an answer. He said, "You have been pouring from an empty vessel for 4 years. You cannot give what you have not first received. The first 7, you were teaching it and you abandoned it. Go home and start there." That evening, I turned my phone off at sundown on Friday and did not turn it back on until Saturday night. I did not answer messages. I did not prepare anything. I sat. I read slowly. I prayed without rushing. My husband and I made dinner and talked about things that had nothing to do with work. I slept well for the first time in months. And on Saturday night, when I sat down to think, my mind was clearer than it had been in years. Not dramatically, not some sudden revelation, just clear. That is what the first 7 gives you. It gives you back your own mind. When you have been working without stopping for years, you do not even know your mind is gone until the moment it comes back. The following week, I did the Shemitah audit. I sat down with a piece of paper, not a spreadsheet, a piece of paper, because I needed to write it with my hand. And I wrote out every single financial obligation I was carrying, every debt, every recurring payment, every partnership, every lease, every automatic charge, every arrangement that took money from me without me actively choosing it each month. It took almost 2 hours just to compile the list. That alone told me something I needed to know. When it takes 2 hours to list what you are obligated to, you are not managing your finances. Your finances are managing you. Then I went through each item one by one and asked the question I had taught so many other families to ask. If I were starting fresh today with everything I know now, would I enter into this again? The publishing partnership? No. The office lease? No. 3 subscriptions I did not even remember signing up for? No. 2 memberships in professional organizations I had once valued and no longer engaged with? No. The debt I could not undo immediately, but I could see it clearly for the first time. I could see its shape, where it had come from, what it was actually costing me. And seeing it clearly, fully, without flinching, that was the beginning of being able to move. The Talmud teaches that the great sage Hillel created the prosbul mechanism to work with the Shemitah principle in practical ways. Even our wisest teachers understood this was never about recklessness. It was about intentionality, about looking honestly at what you are carrying and deciding what belongs going forward and what is just inertia you never got around to releasing. Over the months that followed, I began releasing. I ended the publishing partnership. That conversation had lived in my head for 3 years as something enormous and complicated. It took 20 minutes. Not comfortable, not without some grief. I had believed in that project once, and I had liked my colleague, but it was done. I gave notice on the office lease. I canceled every subscription and membership that had gotten a no on my list. I contacted the organizations I had been a member of out of inertia, and I ended those arrangements. Each release felt like putting down something heavy I had been carrying for so long I had stopped noticing the weight. You know how that is. You carry a bag long enough and you forget your shoulder is sore. You put the bag down and suddenly you feel it. That is what releasing felt like. Not empty, lighter, clearer in my body as much as in my finances. My income was lower for a period. Yes, that was real, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But my expenses dropped enough that for the first time in years, I was actually keeping more than I spent at the end of each month. That is a simple thing. It should not feel miraculous, but when you have not experienced it in years, it does. The third 7 was the one I fought hardest, because I was already giving my time, my knowledge, my presence. I gave constantly, but giving money first before paying my own obligations when I was genuinely close to empty, that felt not just frightening, but irresponsible. I sat with that resistance for several days, and then I thought about Ruth, a real woman who had lived in my neighborhood when I was raising my children. Her husband had passed and left her very little, a small pension, some savings, not enough for anyone not to worry. The rabbi's wife used to bring food on Fridays, and yet every single month, without fail, Ruth gave tzedakah. Not large amounts, $20 sometimes, $50 in better months. People in the community told her she could not afford to give. She always answered the same way. She said, "I cannot afford not to give. When I give, I am telling God that I trust Him to provide, and He has never broken that promise to me." Ruth lived to 93 years old. She never went hungry. She never lost her home. When she passed, those who settled her estate found that her savings had grown steadily for decades. Because she had invested wisely, lived simply, and never stopped giving. The Talmud says, Aser te'asher, tithe so that you will become wealthy. It is a word play in Hebrew. The word for tithe and the word for wealth share the same root. The rabbis were not speaking in metaphor. They were recording a financial principle tested and confirmed across thousands of years of real lives, real hardship, real results. I had told Ruth's story perhaps 200 times from various podiums and living rooms. I believed every word of it, and still, when I was the one near empty, I found every reason why the principle could not apply to me right now, not at this particular level of closeness to zero. That is what fear does to the mind. It makes your own best wisdom feel like it belongs to someone else, like it is meant for other people in other circumstances. Recognizing that I was doing exactly what I had watched others do when I urged them not to, that was its own kind of breaking point. I started with $10. The first month I gave $10 before I paid a single bill. I gave it to someone in my community who needed it. Then $20 the next month. I gave it first, the way Jacob made his vow first. Not after he had built something, not when conditions were better, but at the moment of nothing, lying on the ground with a stone under his head, running from his brother, alone in the dark. He made the vow then, at the worst possible moment of his life. He promised to give away 1/10 of everything he would receive before he had received anything. And he became the patriarch of a nation, the father of 12 tribes, one of the wealthiest men in the ancient world. Something shifted in me when I began giving first. Not in my account immediately. I want to be honest about that. The change was not instant, and it was not magic. But in the quality of my thinking, something was different. I was no longer holding my money in a fist, white-knuckled and afraid. I was releasing it in trust. And that trust changed the quality of every decision I made after. I stopped saying yes to every speaking engagement just because it paid. I started saying no to things that drained me and did not align with what I actually believed. I began to choose my work with more care. And within 7 months, my situation had changed. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but in ways that were real and that have continued to hold. Here is what I want to say directly to you, especially if you are my age or close to it. After 60, the arithmetic is different. You cannot spend your remaining working years exhausted, avoidant, carrying dead weight, giving last. You do not have 40 more years to absorb the cost of compounding bad decisions. But you also have something younger people do not. You have experience. You have lived long enough to know what actually matters and what does not. If you apply these 3 principles now, the effect is not slower than it would have been at 30. In some ways, it is faster because you already know how to stay with hard things. And there is one more thing I want to say because I think it is the most important thing. The temptation after 60 is to wait, to say, I will start when things are more stable. I will rest when the urgent things are handled. I will give when I am on firmer ground. That thinking is exactly backwards. It is what keeps the cycle exactly where it is. Jacob did not wait until he had something to give. Ruth did not wait until her savings felt comfortable. My grandmother did not wait until she could afford to close the shop on Friday. The rhythm does not begin when conditions are perfect. The rhythm creates the conditions. So here is what I am asking you to do this week. Choose one day and stop. Not forever, just one day. Give your mind the silence it needs to think clearly again. Then make the list. Write down every obligation. Ask the question honestly for every single item on it. Begin releasing what does not belong in your next season, and then give something first before you pay a single bill next month, even if it is $10, even if it is $5. Start the channel flowing and trust the principle that has outlasted every empire that ever tried to destroy it. You still have time. Whatever the number is in your account right now, whatever the weight of the obligations you are carrying, you have time. I sat at a kitchen table at 58 with almost nothing, and I rebuilt. Not because I am exceptional, because I finally followed something older and wiser than I am. If this reached something in you today, write in the comments, I choose the rhythm of 7. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I am here every week with teachings like this one. Hit the like button if this was worth your time. Think of one person who is working hard and still struggling and share this with them. There is a form in the description if you have your own story. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. The same God who prospered Jacob, who sustained Ruth, who shielded my grandmother when she arrived in this country with 2 suitcases and a little money sewn into her coat, that God sees you right now. Trust the rhythm, rest, release, give, and watch what He does next.